Okay. All right. So this is the Premier Chess Spring 2021 adult beginner, and this is week 1. Oh, there we have Leonard. Yes, welcome, Leonard. Okay. Okay. All right. So so in this opening position, what would you say is the weakest pawn in this opening position?
I think it's the F2 pawn.
F2 pawn. Any what's the reason why?
I know it can be like that's how you scholar mate somebody.
Okay, so Scholar's Mate, right? There's another reason. So Monty, Roy, or Greg, why is the oh Leonard, welcome,
Hi.
welcome. So yeah, Leonard, the question, I don't know if you heard it, but which of the pawns in the initial position is the weakest? So Anthony said the F2 pawn. So my question was why? Why is that the weakest?
Leaves you in a weak position if you castle.
Well, even before castling. So in this position, why is the F2 pawn the weakest? And same thing with black, the F7 pawn for black.
The king is the only piece that's protecting her.
The king is the only piece, right? So in the opening, what do we try to do with the king in the opening?
Try to get him to safety as soon as possible.
Right. So the king is in peril in the opening and the middle game. We don't want him to be an attacking piece in any regard in the opening and the middle game. So we have to scurry him to safety behind a wall of pawns, right? So that's one reason. And also another reason is this pawn, the F pawn, is the only pawn that's only protected by the king, right? So the king doesn't make a good protector. And Anthony, so what is are you familiar with and Leonard too? Are you familiar with Fool's Mate, Mate in 2, the quickest checkmate?
I don't recall the exact steps, but I have seen it.
Okay, Anthony, do you remember?
Yeah, I mean I've seen it, but I don't remember exactly.
All right, so anybody who's been in my class before, you want to quick do a Fool's Mate run through? Monty or Greg or Roy?
I'm still trying to do the what's the other one with the meat?
With the meat. What's that? Is that the fried liver attack?
The fried liver.
With the meat. So you're saying it's not for vegans, right? Right. Okay, so let's go through it. So the first move would be F4, right? So initial opening up of this sensitive E1 to H4 diagonal, weakening the king somewhat, although this is not necessarily not yet a losing position. Next move for black would be E6, opening up the queen and the bishop, right? And then the next really horrible move for white would be G4. So this would be white's first move, right? This would be black's first move, and then white's second move, G4. And now where is the checkmate? Where's the checkmate?
Queen to H4.
Right, Queen H4. So this would be Fool's Mate, Mate in 2, the fastest checkmate that's possible. And real quick, just as a just to go over, there was a reminder, to review, CPR. So I know I mentioned that a lot with you guys, with Greg, Roy, and Monty. So CPR, in regarding to when your king is being attacked, what does that mean? You guys remember?
Capture, protect, run.
Capture, protect, run. So that's how we assess whether or not it's simply a check and whether or not it's checkmate, right? So in this case, capture, can the queen be captured? No. Protect or block, can anything be interposed between the queen and the king? No. And then run, can the king run away from the check? He's blocked by all of his pieces. He can only run to F2, which would still put him in line with the queen. Therefore, it's checkmate, right? So very quick assessment as to whether or not you're in checkmate, right? So that's the main mate in 2, Fool's Mate, right? Supposedly only fools fall for it. So here's a little variation, F4 of that, F4, E5, sacrificing the pawn. And what's the reason? Actually, let me ask you guys this: what's the reason that we do sacrifices in the beginning, like gambits? This would be considered a gambit, right? What's the reason that one player might choose
Called
to
the
do a
From
gambit?
Gambit.
Say again?
It's called the From Gambit.
Oh, is it? Oh, I didn't even know that. The from gambit. Okay, cool. So what's the purpose? Why do people choose to play gambits in the opening? Anybody have an idea?
To gain space.
Actually, here I would say that white has more space than black, right? Because this pawn is being a little bit menacing, although the bishop is open. Not necessarily to gain space. Anybody else? Why does a person choose to do a gambit? What do you think?
Well, speak in general, by the way, because you might get a couple types of things for it, but like in general, why would you do a gambit?
Yeah.
It's
You give up
sacrificing.
material to gain like a positional advantage.
Right. Gain positional advantage, a lead in development, quickly get your king to safety. And basically it's a very aggressive opening, trying to gain initiative as soon as possible, right? So the greedy person that's acquiring all this material is doing it at his own peril, because now d6 in this position, he sacrifices another pawn, and bishop d6, and now as you can see, this bishop is very powerful, open. This bishop is open, very powerful. The queen is open. So and comparing that to white's position, none of white's pieces are developed or even open. No open lines, no open diagonals. So this is a very, very dangerous position for white. White does another horrible move, knight c3. Now in this position, can any of you see the mate in 3 moves? Mate in 3 moves.
And when you're doing these, right, the first thing you really always want to think about is forcing moves, right? So
Yeah.
what is the number one forcing type of move in chess,
The checking the king.
Right.
right?
Checks.
So in fact,
Queen.
I was having a discussion with one of our other instructors, Phil, a couple weeks ago, and we were teaching a class together. And honestly, I thought he was incorrect. I asked him actually in front of the class, like what's the number one forcing type of move? And he said checkmate threat, right? But then I told to him, I was like, Phil, if you threaten checkmate against me, do I have to respond to it? He was like, yeah, sort of, but technically no, right? I won't put it this. It would be really nice, right, if I missed the checkmate in one move, and I said, oh, I'm going to take back the move. Right, I won't be able to. I'm checkmated. That's the end of the game. Right, but if I am in check and I don't get out of check, well, I'm actually going to take back the move. Right, so it's the number one for. So later on, you're probably going to get some more checkmate puzzles where it's not necessarily like check. But for the most part, now most of the checkmating exercises that you're going to do will likely involve a lot of checks.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Checks are, as Evan said, it's against the rules for you not to address the check, right? Whereas if there's a mate threat, it's not against the rules for you to ignore that. You can't
I'd
ignore
say
it.
the first move is queen h3
Queen h4, I assume you mean.
or h4, yeah.
Right. Good. So queen h4 check again. So it's not immediately mate, right? Because the G
No.
pawn has not been advanced, so he can block. But now what do we do?
Bishop g3.
Very good. Bishop takes g3. So it's very weak diagonal here, and the queen delivers the final mate, right? And another variation that I like to show is that this diagonal is so weak, the e1 to h4 diagonal, that even queen takes g3. You can sacrifice your queen, and the bishop still delivers mate, right? Because the diagonal is so weak. And chess is not just about logic and numbers and math, but it's also about beauty and art, right? So you need to make chess beautiful. This, I think, is a little more beautiful, right? So that is the fool's mate. And
I think you go back a couple moves, Danilo,
Sure.
before queen h4 check, right? Where I played knight c3.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, before knight c3.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth noting here, right? And I'm not saying we should talk about like all the theory of the Fromm's Gambit, which by the way I could. I used to play this as black, and I still
Okay.
do. But what should white do here? Right, of course, Danilo, was talking about mating, so he said, "Oh, knight c3, this is what's going to happen." But what should white do here?
Right.
Pawn to king 4.
King.
Well, that would be better. But what do you think black would do after that?
Check and then take the pawn.
Right,
Right.
It's not looking so pretty for you,
Right.
right? Because
Right.
of course, at g3,
So why would
right,
G3
what do
be
you
a
think
bad
black's
move?
best move is?
Right.
Or what about knight g3? And then the queen.
Maybe bishop takes g3.
You mean bishop takes G3?
I meant before you even move the pawn, the very first one. Even before you move
Well, the
e4
knight
pawn.
can't jump to G3.
I meant f3.
That's
Oh,
not
you
getting
mean
out of check.
you mean before the before E instead of E4?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay. well,
yes.
Yeah,
That's
that's
correct.
yeah, that's true. So, but in this position, why is G3 a pretty bad move here? Actually, you know what? No, it doesn't really work actually, because I'm looking at queen takes E5,
Queen
E4.
E2,
Sorry. It
So yeah,
seems like
bishop
it
takes
forks.
d3 is probably like definitely stronger than queen takes.
Yeah,
E4.
right. So it looks like the fork occurs, but what can white do to save his rook? How can white save his rook here?
Yeah, this is an important point actually.
Queen to f3. I'm sorry.
Well, you got to
Queen
get
to-
out of check.
Yeah, you're in check
E-
here.
Yeah, queen to e2.
Queen E2, very good. Yeah, so now we are pinning the black queen to the king, right? So the black queen cannot leave the E file, right? So this
Right.
saves the rook
Yeah,
very
put the
nicely.
queen back on d1 for a second because I just want to
Mhm.
illustrate and point.
Mhm.
So here's the thing, right? I know so many, there's a reason that Danilo actually before said CPR, right? Capture, protect, run, right? Because I know a lot of students that would actually just immediately move their king and then lose their rook and then just have a losing position, right? So when you are in check, right, before you think about even running with your king, you want to think about protecting. Before you want to do that, you want to think about, could I capture? Right? There's a reason it's CPR, not something else.
Not just R.
But often actually, I do actually ask students what are the 3 ways to get out of check, and they do start to say move the king, capture, protect. Right?
Mhm.
But no, it should be in that order very specifically. So so go back, right? So Anthony correctly said knight f3 is the best move.
Yeah, so the weak spot is the H4 square, right? So we need to, because this diagonal is weak, so we need to prevent the queen from coming on H4. Therefore, knight f3 is a beautiful move. Simultaneously, developing it to a very ideal spot, right, towards the center, controlling d4 and e5, as well as g5, and preventing the queen from coming to.
So if you look
H4.
at my thought process, okay, so put the knight back on g1 just for a second, right? So in this position, right, the one thing that a lot of beginners and intermediate players, even make mistakes with all the time is you just forget something so simple, right? And I've said this multiple times today already. Whatever you want in chess, your opponent wants the opposite, right? That needs to be your assumption, right? Leonard actually was in the adult rookie, class with me, this, winter, right? I probably said that almost every day, right? And actually some of you have, learned with me previously, before that, in private lessons and group classes. So the point here is, right? Yeah, right. That needs to be your assumption, right? I was teaching a lesson earlier today. I had one student make this move, knight g5. Okay, and I said, "Oh, why'd you do that?" He's like, "Oh, I wanted to trade." And I said, "What if your opponent moves his knight elsewhere and doesn't trade?" "Oh, I didn't really think about that so much." right? But that should be his natural reaction. Oh, I want to trade, so my opponent doesn't want to trade.
Right.
And so that's why, like, if you want something, you need to force it. So in this position, right, like you, right, can't just like develop your pieces, right? Like, yeah, like if you just start say like, oh yeah, guess what, Coach Danilo, Coach Evan taught me there are 3 basic things I want to do in the opening: develop, control the center, castle. Right, compared to all that, okay, knight c3 is a reasonable move, but of course it's losing in 3 moves. Right, so given the fact that Black wants to play queen h4 check, right, there's only like 2 real candidate moves. Okay, maybe 3, right? Like knight f3, g3, and if you really want to argue, okay, king f2, right? Because it'll stop like the mating stuff, right? But of course, you don't want to move your king, right? So knight f3, like therefore, is like totally actually like the best move, basically. So play knight f3. All right, I'm gonna say like 1 or 2 more things, and then I'll sit in the background.
No problem.
I want to see if someone could guess. And this is not an easy question, actually, especially for the first week of the beginner class. But what do you think is the most theoretical move here? Now, I don't expect anyone to know it, like based on memory or seeing this position before. But I want, like, given the fact that you really want to play queen h4, how could you start fighting to get that in?
Bishop to g4.
Well, bishop g4 is possible, but okay, white probably plays e4. Would you agree, Danilo?
Yeah, e4 is a pretty good move. Yeah.
All right. So, like, yeah, I don't know. Right. So, like, for instance, if all your goal is to play queen h4 check, yeah, you could, right? Bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, queen h4 check. Okay. But what would white do here?
Yeah. What do you think best move here?
G3.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's
Right.
not as
Capture,
strong.
protect, run. Right. Okay. You can't capture. So protect. Okay. And the queen runs away. And of course, white, I think, is probably a little bit better in this position because he has nice pawn in the center and he has 2 bishops, right? To have the bishop pair is, basically about an extra half a point. So, yeah, go back to before bishop g4, right? To, after knight f3.
What else? Other possibilities here?
I'll give you a slight hint. It's a little bit of like a weird move.
For black?
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, because white played knight f3. But also, one thing you have to consider, right? Let me ask a simple question. Who has to prove something here, white or black? Just in general, who has to prove something?
Let's say black.
Right? Yeah, right? Just by nature, right? When you make a gambit, you're the one who has to prove something, right? If white could just get a couple moves in, develop, castle, well, he's going to be up a pawn for nothing. Right? And one thing I really try to remind everyone is like the value of a pawn, right? If Danilo and I are playing, we're very even in strength together. If I'm up a pawn against him for nothing, I'm going to win a majority of the time, and vice versa. Right now, if I'm up a pawn and he has a lot of compensation, or the position is really unclear, there's a lot of like tactics happening. Yeah, anything can happen. But if I'm just up one healthy pawn against him, that's a problem.
I think I remember reading somewhere, if you're going to give up a pawn like that, you have to have some type of positional compensation for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, because otherwise, you're just down a pawn.
Yeah.
Right, so like I'll give you an example. Like earlier today, I was teaching, a private lesson to a student, and Yeah, it was actually very interesting. There was one position that we were looking at where white was actually down a pawn, but when you turned on the engine, it actually said like 1.2. Right? So like despite being like material down a pawn, he was actually in the grand scheme of things up a pawn in terms of positional advantage.
Pawn to C5.
Pawn to C5, you said?
Mhm.
What's your idea of C5?
Well, trying to control the center. And if he moves his knight
Okay, but
towards the center.
again, right, you're the one who has to prove something.
Right.
Right. So like, okay, white plays E4, right? Same move as before. I don't know. I don't see where your compensation is. Right. As Leonard actually said correctly, right? Look, black needs to prove something here. Right? If white could just develop his pieces, control the center. Right? He's also has this potential open file on the F file.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, go back. Right. So okay. So black really wants to play that Queen H4 check, right? Of course, in the game, right, that Danilo was looking at before, white didn't even fight against it, right? He just played Knight C3, Queen H4 check. Okay, game is history. Of course, Knight F3 is the theoretical move to play. So how could you start to try to force that knight to move? By the way, and as many moves as you need. Right, so bishop G4, by the way, I would say is the best guess that I've seen.
Yeah, most direct way to put pressure. Yeah. Any other ideas?
Okay, so I'm going to ask a little bit of a silly question, but at the same time, a very useful one. If black had 3 moves in a row, how would he take the knight on F3?
Start with knight c6.
Well, but okay, even then, right? Knight C6, knight E5, knight takes F3, he takes F3. Right, that's a trade.
Mm-hmm.
I might even give you those moves.
G pawn on black.
There we go.
Right.
Right? It's 3 moves, right? In a row. G5, G4, G takes F3. Right? Have any of you heard of Bill Lombardi?
Yep.
So Bill Lombardi was a dear friend and mentor of mine, and he was also Bobby Fischer's second. He traveled with him playing tournaments and going over all of his openings. But one of the biggest suggestions that Bill, taught me was, look, when you're struggling to come up with a plan, okay, like just remember, like think of one way to think about it, right, is, right, what's your like dream? Right? Black's dream, of course, is to play Queen H4 check. Right? Guess what? I know a lot of, right? This is the beginner class, not the rookie class. Right? But I know a lot of like, rookie players, who are just starting out. They say, oh, like Queen H4, it's checkmate. Right? Because the king has nowhere to go. But of course, we know that, okay, knight takes H4. It's not possible. Okay? And even if not, okay, G3 is there. Okay? But that's not to say that I need to totally give up on the idea of playing Queen H4 check. I just can't do it right now. So one thing that Lombardi really, drilled into me all the time was how you need to, in many cases, right, get to sort of your dream and then figure out, exactly how to actually get there. So G5 is actually the main move here in this position. So now, of course, black has a rather simple threat, right? G4. So white actually only has like basically one good move here. Other than this, he's like basically losing. And that is to play D4. All right, 'cause if he doesn't play D4, like, yeah, G4 is just like game over. Right, and of course, H3 might be played, to prevent G4, but of course, what is black gonna do here?
Yeah, why is H3 a losing move?
Right, so it prevents G4, but what does it allow?
It allows bishop G3.
Yeah, bishop
Not only
3.
just bishop G3 though, it's bishop G3 checkmate,
Right.
right? Which obviously would not be good for white.
Mm.
So, right, the point here is, right, you really need to, think about these ideas, right? Because now, right, what's the big idea? After G4, okay, that's actually the most theoretical move. Okay, black, white, what does white do here?
Bishop to G5.
Bishop G5 is tempting, right? You're like, ooh, counterattack, right? And by the way, right, there is a famous saying in chess, right? The best type of defense is counterattack. However, how could black win a piece by force?
Any ideas? Black's best move here.
Why would he not just take the knight?
Take the
Oh,
knight.
this is queen.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
All right. So bishop G5 is a counterattack on the queen. So what is black's best move here?
H6.
H6. This one. You just lose your queen here.
the other pawn.
F6. Right. F6. Yeah. So
Right.
so now we have two pieces being attacked. Right.
Right. So it's basically a fork, right? Your
Right.
queen is no longer in danger, and you're attacking two more things at once, right? I don't see a way for white to say both.
Mhm.
Yeah, right. So okay, so go back to like put this position. Yeah, G4 in this position. What was the whole idea of D4? It was a big idea of D4.
Get rid of the knight.
No,
Oh,
the idea behind D4.
Oh, you,
Right, because here's the thing, right? Like, let's say white plays knight G1. Okay. What is black going to play here?
Queen H4.
Right, exactly. Right, just like before.
Mhm.
Right? It's a little bit better for you now because you're not going to get checkmated. Okay, but after G3, bishop takes G3 check. Right, you have to play King D2, and of course, this is not very good for you. Right, you're down a pawn, and this king is it's just very losing for white. So go back to with the knight on F3. Right, what was the big idea of D4? What could you do because the pawn is actually now on D4?
Can move your king. If
Well, if you move your
black,
king, then your knight's going to get captured.
Yeah. So G4 was the last move, attacking the knight. So what would be the best move for white?
And move your bishop.
Oh, so here's the thing, right?
C5.
No, it's white's move.
Bishop to G5.
Oh, well, we just said bishop G5, F6, right? And you lose one of your pieces,
Oh, wait, what am I
Right.
doing?
right? So yeah, the current threat, white wants to get in queen H4. So how do we, how does white continue to obstruct his plan? What do you think?
Queen D3.
Well, without losing the piece, right? Yeah, without losing the piece.
So here's the thing, right? No matter what you do with your knight, he could play queen h4. Well, not no matter what. You could play knight g5 as well. But knight g5. No, why that's not so good.
Maybe you can
Yeah, I
kick-
guess just h6, right? And
Yeah.
then the knight goes to e4. And yeah, maybe this is possible.
Yeah, it seems like it still works. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's possible as well, actually. I haven't looked at this opening in a long time. That does appear to
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like it.
well. Yeah, so go back. Yeah, so knight g5 might be possible too, but the main idea is knight e5. Right? Because now if queen h4 check, would that be a good move?
What does white do now? Response.
Would queen h4 check be a good move?
No, because now you have G3 isn't being
Exactly.
attacked.
Right? It's actually just a pretty bad move, right? Because then the queen just needs to run away and you continue to develop your pieces and, you're doing rather well. So, yeah, so basically like this is the end. And okay, there's like more complications from here. It doesn't exactly make sense to get it to. But I thought there was a lot of exciting stuff. Do you have any thoughts or questions? All right. Hopefully this was a little useful.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't even know this was a Frum's Gambit. Yeah, I know some openings, but not necessarily the names, all the names. So great. All right. So that is Fool's Mate and variations on the Fool's Mate. So let's review Scholar's Mate very quick. So anybody know the basic moves for Scholar's Mate? So that'd be the 4-move checkmate. Anybody?
4, E5.
E4, E5. What
Queen
else?
to D5. I mean, queen to H5.
Queen H5. Okay, that's one possibility. I'd say a slightly more accurate would be Bishop C4 first, right? Because Bishop C4 can be a nice developing move. Anyway, Queen H4 is much more of an attacking, aggressive move, and also put your queen in danger prematurely if it's no other piece, assisting in the attack, right? So Bishop C4, I would prefer first, and then maybe let's see, maybe B6. So now Queen H5 is a nice move. So why actually let me ask you guys this: why aside from the reasons I said with the bishop, why is this better move now than do Queen H5 on the second move? Anybody see a reason? It's not as potent on the second move. Why is that?
So they can respond with the knight F6.
Well, knight F6 just drops the E5 pawn, right? So Anybody else? Why is in this position Queen H5 on the second move not as strong as Queen H5 after Bishop C4? What do you guys think?
Black could move his pawn. Never mind. Wait, well, yeah, a pawn to D5.
Pawn D5. Well, again, you just dropped this pawn. So yeah, so here,
Oh.
there's only one threat in this position, which is Queen takes E5. That's the only threat, right? So you got many different options to defend that pawn. And so that's why this is a pretty weak move, right? Queen H5. Besides putting the queen in danger prematurely. But with Bishop C4, now this is a dual threat, right? So we have mate threat on the F7, and we have threatening the E5 pawn, right? So a little bit more potent than Queen H5 on the second move, right? So what would be the best move here? Best move for black.
On G6.
Pawn G6. Okay, so now what's the best move for white here?
Queen takes E5, check, and attacking the rook.
Yeah, so now this is a very different position from the one we saw before. Why? Because white's pawn is on E4. Therefore, Queen E7 is not a pin, right? So now the queen is free to take the rook, right? So it's a very precise difference between this position and the last one before. So yeah, G6 opens up the long dark square diagonal, right? So what would be a better move than G6 to defend against mate here?
Queen E7.
Yeah, Queen E7 is a good move. Yeah, very good move. I'd say that's the best move. Some students would say Knight H6. Not really the best. Well, number one, the pawn falls, but also white can advance D4, open up an attack on the knight, and again, the mate threat is renewed, so not as strong. And of course, knights on the side are very weak and in danger of being trapped, so we don't want to do that if at all possible. So yeah, Queen E7 is very comfortably protects the E5 pawn, protects against mate. Now, after that, G6 would be a nice move, fianchettoing the bishop, and then of course, developing the knight to F6, very natural move. That simultaneously gains a tempo, right? I've mentioned that before. When you move with a gain of tempo, what does that mean? What does that mean when we do something with a gain of tempo? Anybody know what that means?
We've gained development.
It could be a developing move. Not necessarily. You can gain tempo at any time during the game.
I was on mute. So normally, right, the idea of tempo, right? So every tempo in chess is a half a move.
Right.
Right. So like normally, right, when I develop a piece, well, you could develop a piece. Right? But if I develop a piece and you're making a move that's just like moving your piece backwards, well, essentially I gain the tempo because then I get to develop my next piece. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. However, it gets tricky because like I've seen it's white to move here, right?
Black to move here. So
Black to move here.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. White to move. Sorry. Yeah. Black to say Queen E7. Right.
Yeah. Right. So like for instance, like one thing that I'll see, beginners do because they get so excited about the idea of tempo is they might make a move like, Bishop D5 here. Being like, oh, I'm getting a tempo because he needs to respond to the fact that his rook's in danger. Right. But of course, no, black is going to play C6. Okay. And the bishop just has to run away. Right. White didn't gain any tempos. In fact, black, in a way, just gained a tempo because C6 is a pretty useful move and the bishop just has to run backwards. Right. Now, how would black actually gain a tempo here in this position? So in other words, how do you develop a piece with a threat at the same time?
Pawn to B5.
So that's like another move that's actually honestly kind of like what I was just saying, right? It's like a move that like, oh, it's attacking, but like other than attacking the bishop, does that move actually really help your position? Not necessarily, right? In
Knight
fact, one thing,
F6.
No,
Knight
F6,
F6.
F6 is impossible because of the pin. Oh, you said knight. Did you say knight F6?
No, I think you said knight
Oh, you
F6.
said knight F6. Okay, yeah, good. Yeah.
Right? Knight F6, that's a real win of a tempo, right? Because look, forget about the fact that knight is threatening the queen, right? White would love to make a move like knight F3. Okay, but of course he can't play knight F3. Why? Because he's going to lose his queen, right? So now White actually has to retreat his queen, probably to like E2, right? But okay, now Black can play like, guess what? How can Black make another move, gaining a tempo? So make a nice developing type of move that actually has a threat as well. And if it's not a developing move, it's a move that helps you develop other pieces.
It's an opening move.
D5.
Very
There you
good.
go. Right? Because again, right, White would love to just continue playing knight F3. Of course, he can't do that. Right? And by the way, I do see a lot of beginners, unfortunately, making those kind of mistakes. Why? Because, again, like I was saying before, develop your pieces, control the center, castle. Right? But no, you got to look both ways.
Mhm.
Trying to take my bishop.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of beginners have blinders on, like the horses. They like, a lot of beginners like to attack. Attacking is fun, right? Maybe developing your pieces, castling, not as fun. So the beginners develop one piece or maybe two pieces and they start attacking. And they leave the rest of their pieces on their openings on the opening square, or the beginning square, and they try to mount an attack with two pieces, which usually fails. So make sure you get all of your pieces into the fray, right? They all want to join the party, and first get your king to safety, of course, before you do that. So yeah, that's one major reason why Queen H5, although a lot of beginners do fall for that, if Black knows how to successfully evade it, this queen easily will get harassed and perhaps even trapped and captured, right? Once you develop your queen so early, it's not a good idea. It's a very powerful piece, and it can be kicked around by small pieces like pawns, knights, bishops, that kind of thing. All right. So yeah. Let's go back here. Yeah, so this is actually a really good illustration. Attacking without thinking, without thinking of the of your opponent's possible replies.
So yeah,
right?
you never want to make an attacking move just for the sake of making an attacking move.
Right.
Right? Because you also have to, again, like assume, right? Whatever you want, your opponent wants the opposite. Right? So you can play bishop d5, right? You're threatening the rook, but of
Yeah.
course, any decent chess player is going to see it, and they're going to play either c6 or maybe knight c6. But okay, I think c6 is better. It's attacking the bishop.
And the same reasoning can be applied to checks, right? I think a lot of beginners see a check and they play check. They check their king. Everyone likes to attack the king, right? But again, you attacking the king sometimes can help your opponent's development, right? If they can gain tempo while defending, such as a move like c6, right? So even checking is not always a good idea.
Right.
Must assess the position, right? So yeah, so that's the basic scholar's mate. So yeah, queen e7 basically demonstrates this queen to be out of place, right? Misdeveloped, and that's no good. So we don't want to do that, right? So as much as possible, avoid doing this, even though it's tempting, and some beginners do fall for it. But it's a risk, you know. And when I play chess, I'm not necessarily the gambiting, risking type of person. I'm more the developing. You know, you have to acquire a stable, solid position, and then once that occurs, the tactics come naturally out of such a stable and solid position. So yeah. All right. Is there any questions with the scholar's mate, by the way? Any questions? No?
Nope.
Okay. All right. So let me do real quick. We've got a few minutes left. I'm going to do. Anybody heard of the Legal's mate? Legal's mate. I know I did go over that with some of my students from the past. Anybody know what that is?
No.
Before I do it, Legal's mate? No? Okay, good. All right, let's go over it again. Why not? All right, so E4, E5. Let's say knight F3. Okay. Let's say here D6. Okay, knight C3. Bishop G4. So why would he do bishop G4? What do you think? What's the purpose of that move?
Pins a knight.
Pins the knight, good. Trying to immobilize the knight, right? All right, so white responds with bishop C4, and a not so strong move, B6. Now notice black is focused on moving pawns, while white is focused on developing his minor pieces, and now he's actually ready to castle and bring his king to safety, right? So white's definitely in a nicer position here. Okay, so now in this position, there's actually a very nice move. Can anybody see it? What do you guys think? Best move for white here. Evan, Eugene is in the intermediate class?
I just messaged you in the chat.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
So I
cool.
will say for this one, you have to think outside the box.
Yeah.
Knight G5.
Knight G5. Let's
Oh.
see.
So what are you going to play after bishop takes D1?
Okay.
Bishop takes F7.
Okay, and then king E7. Or actually, yeah, even better, king D7. Oh, wait, what am I doing? King E7 would be the same.
What does it?
But
Yeah, it
yes,
doesn't matter.
king
Yeah.
D7.
Yeah.
Didn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah. So black has too many options to escape here, right?
Right. So one thing you have to think about. I'm actually going to pull up a blog post that I wrote a couple weeks ago about transformational moves. Some of you might have seen it. Most of you, or probably all of you, are certainly on our newsletter. But you know, the biggest type of transformational move is sacrifice, right? Especially a queen sacrifice. Right. So if you're going to sacrifice a queen, you need to have a very concrete answer as to, you know, what you're going to get out of it. Right. Because, you know, before, right, we were talking about, you know, getting compensation for a pawn. Okay, but compensation for a queen, right, it can't just be like very rare. I mean, I've seen some beautiful examples where this actually has happened. Okay. But rarely do you sacrifice a queen for positional compensation. Right? How many games have you seen that in, Danilo?
Right. Not often.
Or sacrifice a queen, it's like not for like an immediate mate.
Right.
Right? Very rare. And like usually in that case, like you'll actually get like a rook and a bishop for it. So it's not like a full on, you know, queen sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the right idea, but how can you do something that's, you know, a little bit more concrete?
All right. So yeah. So knight G5 not strong enough. Anybody else? So another aspect of this, which is good to point out, is so we said this is a pin. So there's two types of pins. Anybody know the two types of pins?
Well,
Other than Evan?
absolute pin is when you're pinned the king,
Excellent. Very good. And then
and this is a relative pin, I think.
relative pin. Good. So the knight can move. It's not against the rules to move the knight. Most times it is undesirable to move the knight because the queen is worth much more than the bishop. However, there are certain exceptions to that case. And in this position, this is one notable exception, right? So knight takes e5 is a very strong move here. So white can decline this. Sorry, black can decline the sacrifice, take the knight, and so the queen takes the bishop, and then white just won a pawn. And the only reason this sacrifice works actually also is because this bishop is unprotected, right? So if the knight was on f6, then he would just be losing a knight and it wouldn't make sense, right? Because the bishop would be protected. So the only reason it works is because the bishop is not protected, right? So black takes a chance and says, I'm going to take the bishop. Let me see what you got up your sleeve. And what does white do here?
Now bishop takes f7.
Yeah, so we just sacrificed our queen, right? So we want to make sure we did that for a good reason, right? So some beginners would say, I'll take back the bishop, you know, but we didn't sacrifice the queen to gain a bishop. You know, we sacrificed the queen for something much more valuable. So definitely bishop takes f7. You always look for checks first, right? That's actually that's not the only check. You can go bishop b5, but not strong enough. So yeah, bishop takes f7 is a strong check. And there's only one way to escape it, king e7. And now what do we do?
Oh. C6? No, stop, take it back.
Yeah, it's white's move here. White's move.
Knight d5 checkmate.
Knight d5 checkmate. Beautiful
Mm.
mate, nicknamed the Legal's mate after the player that made it famous. And so this is a beautiful checkmate. The bishop controls e8 and e6. The knights protect the bishop, protects the d7 square. The d5 knight attacks the king and prevents escape on f6, right? So beautiful coordination with the three minor pieces. Yeah. So this should lead you to think that when your queen is pinned, sometimes, very rarely, sometimes it's a good idea to sacrifice the queen. So you should always consider these moves. You know, one of the differences between a master and a beginner is that masters are very good at considering all moves, right? Some moves to a beginner would look like, oh, that's a horrible move. Why would I ever even think about it? Whereas a master would think about pretty much any move and consider the possibilities. You know, sometimes the move that looks the most outlandish and wild and crazy is the answer, is the best move. And I've seen that many, many times studying, grandmaster games. So yeah, any questions about any of these mates or anything that we went over today? What do you guys think?
No.
Comments, observations? What do you think?
Nope.
Everything's good?
Yeah.
Cool. Is this all new for you? For any? Well, I know I went over this with my other students, but Anthony, is this all this new?
I mean, I'd done the Fools and the Scholars mate before, but I've
Okay.
never seen this Legal's mate. So I need to
Cool.
look a little deeper in this because I've been in definitely this position as white.
Cool.
but,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like when the bishop's pinning the queen, and I always get confused as to
Right.
basically what to do.
Yeah, well, just make sure that the bishop is not protected. If you try this, if the bishop's protected, doesn't work.
Right.
Doesn't work. You're just gonna lose your knight. So, but yeah, it's a very beautiful knight, very beautiful mate here, and I think it's also an illustration of how you can punish your opponent for not developing pieces, right? For some beginners just do pawn moves, right? And they think that's equal to development. and it's really not, right? So make sure you, and as I say a lot in my classes, the opening is a race, right? It's a race against your opponent to develop your pieces as quick as possible, control the center, and get your king to safety, right? And basically, whoever does that the fastest usually has a superior game. Usually will probably end up winning, right? So black violated that principle with just developing the bishop and moving pawns, right? So you got to be careful with that. All right. Okay, good. So, Evan, you want me to close out the session and you open it back up again?
I guess we might as well, I'll just keep it open actually. Just, yeah, in the recording.
Yeah, sure. Okay, cool.
Does anyone have any questions for me while I'm here?
Yeah.
Any chess related question that you've always been itching to ask?
No.
Was the tip off in this the unprotected bishop?